Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to yet another interesting webinar of Steelmint Engage 4.0, the Virtual Connect. The webinar series aims at having a deeper understanding on the macroeconomic factors impacting global steel trade flows, assessing demand-supply situation, and to get an idea of the near-term outlook of steel and related commodities. I am Nishtha Mukherjee, your host for the webinar.
And I'm Madhumita Mukherjee, editor, Steelmint, here to jointly host this webinar with Nishtha. The topic is MENA steel industry opportunities and challenges.
Thanks, ma'am. I would also like to thank Indian Steel Association for extending their logo support for the webinar. Today's esteemed guest speaker for this webinar is Dr. Ankur Dana, CEO, Dana Steel. As a message to the audience that we would be taking all the audience queries towards the end of the session. So requesting all of you to send in your queries in the chat box and we will be taking them in the good time. Do not forget to mention your name as well as your company's name when you send in your queries.
Thanks, Nishtha. The GCC countries were able to weather the headwinds in 2022 thanks to high oil prices, strong domestic demand, a rebound in tourism, and the inflow of foreign wealth. WSA predicted that growth is expected to decelerate in 2023 and 2024 due to slower expansion in the oil sector and fiscal conservatism. Over to you, Nishtha.
Thanks, ma'am, for that quick market overview. I'm sure we all and our audience would learn a lot more about the situation in Middle East from our esteemed speaker, Dr. Ankur Dana, CEO, Dana Steel, who is joining us from UAE. Since joining Dana Group, Dr. Ankur has been instrumental in starting the value-added steel manufacturing division and is also actively informed and involved in the strategic planning activities. Company's latest project in Dubai Industrial City is its continuous galvanizing line with 250,000 tons per annum project and the color coating line with 150,000 ton per annum project. Dr. Ankur Dana has been a regular speaker and a panelist in various steel-related events, exhibitions, and conferences over the years. And also, he has been recognized as the next generation leader by the Forbes Middle East magazine for the last 3 years. Welcome, Dr. Dana, and over to you for the presentation on current steel market trends in Middle East.
Thank you very much, Madam Nishtha and Madam Madhumita. Respected attendees, organizers, a very good afternoon to all of you. First of all, I would like to thank Steelmint for having me here to share my 2 cents on the MENA market scenario and market dynamics in the region. I hope my presentation gives you some valuable insights on the various projects which are going on in this region and the forecasted demands for steel and the GDP over the years ahead. Let me start my presentation. So I'll start off with a brief introduction about Dana Group and its various activities. I'll then move on to discuss the various projects which are announced in the GCC market and also about the market overview. I will then move on to discuss about the macroeconomic outlook in the MENA region. Following this, I will conclude my presentation with a synopsis of what I have discussed. So about Dana Group is a close-knit family of over 1,000 individuals working across various industry verticals in the GCC, Asia, and Africa. We are a well-diversified conglomerate having various interests in steel, oil, real estate, healthcare, and hospitality. Steel being one of our most major verticals. At Dana Steel, our motto is adding value to steel, and we believe in delivering exceptional value to our clients. We started off with various downstream activities in the early 2000s. We are at the moment having 4 steel processing and production units in the UAE, which are manufacturing various MEP products, roofing and cladding products, and HVAC products. As a backward integration in the year 2017, we started off with our continuous galvanizing and continuous color coating plant in Dubai Industrial City. We are having an installed capacity of 250,000 tons per annum for galvanizing and also 150,000 tons for color coating. We are the only one to have a twin ceramic pot, which is the galvalume and the galvanizing pot in one line. In addition to that, our line also has online skin passing, tension leveling, and a vertical non-ox furnace. These are just some pictures of our facilities in Dubai Industrial City. As a part of phase 2 expansion, in just last year, we have announced a cold rolling and a pickling complex, which is announced in Kizad, which is at the border of Dubai and Abu Dhabi. This is the signing ceremony, where we will be having an installed capacity of a push-pull pickling line and an acid regeneration plant for supporting 500,000 tons per annum. In addition to that, we'll be having cold rolling and annealing facilities for 450,000 tons per annum. It is scheduled for production by the mid of 2024, and it's a backward integration of our phase 1 facilities of Dubai Industrial City. Moving on, as I said, I'll be discussing about the various key GCC projects in the region. I'll start off with UAE. UAE has various ambitious projects which have been announced and which are more ambitious than even before. So we are having the Dubai Creek Tower. We're having Marsa Al Anar with Burj Bin Ghati, which is the tallest residential tower. Besides that, there's also Dubai Vertical City, One Zabil, which has been recently inaugurated. So these are various construction projects which are happening in the GCC, not to mention various villa complexes, housing projects under the onus of the UAE government. There have been various housing projects launched for the citizens of UAE. Besides that, the major push for the UAE is the infrastructure segment. In the UAE of late, in the last 5 years, we have seen a major push towards infrastructure. In particular, their most ambitious project on this is the Etihad Rail project, which is a railway line which is connecting all the way from Abu Dhabi to Fujairah, and it is also extending to Oman. Very recently, it was announced that Etihad Rail has collaborated with Oman Rail for an inter-country connectivity, and which is going to very soon be connected with Saudi as well. Besides that, the traditional oil and gas projects in UAE, which remain at the forefront, is we have the key important projects is the Hale and Ghasha Sour gas development. And besides that, there's the Bab Sour gas processing plant and the expansion of the Ruwais refinery complex. Now moving on to KSA. So who has not seen what has been launched and what ambitious projects KSA has been launching over the past 3 years? Since the new Crown Prince has been leading a very active role in the progress and development of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, we've heard of various major projects. Not just this, for the first time, Saudi Arabia has been emphasizing on these projects and advertising them on a global scale. They have I've seen advertisements on international media as far as in Asia, in Africa, and even in the United States and Europe. One of the most ambitious projects is the Neom city, which is a straight line city which has been announced in the western region in the Red Sea area. Besides that, we also have the new Murabba project in Riyadh, the King Abdullah Economic City, and 500,000 housing units in different areas of Saudi Arabia. A major infrastructure push in Saudi Arabia as well. We have the Riyadh Metro project, the Makkah Medina Railway Link, and the Makkah Mass Transit Network. So we've seen that these countries, whether it is UAE or the KSA, there has been an increasing push towards infrastructure projects and new development projects. So they have been diversifying from being a purely oil-based economy towards non-oil based activities. That is one of the key focus areas of these countries. Of course, oil is the backbone of the revenue generation in these countries, but they have realized that over the years, there are other things which can lead to sustainable growth. And one of them is development of infrastructure, development of tourism. So that is where the key focus of the UAE and KSA is. Not to mention, there has been a very key emphasis on alternative energy in these regions. Despite of being blessed with hydrocarbons, these countries have recently started ambitiously seeking various alternative energy projects. Some of them notable are the KA alternative project, which is forecasted to have 16 nuclear reactors producing 17.6 gigawatt of combined nuclear power. In UAE, already the nuclear power facility ENAC has already been launched, but the Saudi Arabia, it has just now been tendered for construction. Besides that, the renewable energy program in Saudi Arabia, which is intends to deploy 40 gigawatt of solar power as part of the 58.7 gigawatt target of the Vision 2030. Also, not to mention Neom Green Hydrogen Company, which has been launched for producing it's the world's largest plant to produce green hydrogen, which has been announced with collaboration with Air Products. Moving on to Qatar, again here in Qatar, there has been a major emphasis on infrastructure projects. The last couple of years, they were mainly focusing on the World Cup, the FIFA World Cup. It has just been completed. So they developed their roads, infrastructures, even the Qatar Metro was developed for that. Now they're focusing on the Qatar National Rail Scheme. There is also the new Doha port, which is the expansion of the Hamad port. The traditional oil and gas projects in Qatar are the North Field Expansion Project. Again, we have the Gas to Liquids Project and the Qatar National Railway Scheme. Oman, again, Oman Rail is one of the major infrastructure projects. Besides that, the traditional oil and gas projects have the Duqm refinery expansion project. So Duqm is one of the ports where Oman has been seen a rapid expansion. As a matter of fact, I'll be discussing later on in the presentation, one of the major steel players and giants in India has announced a major expansion in the Duqm area in Oman. In Kuwait, also the infrastructure, there has been a key focus on development of the Kuwait Metropolitan Rapid Transit System, the Kuwait National Railroad Network, and of course the Kuwait, in the oil and gas, we have the Jurassic Production Facility and the Kuwait New Refinery Project. So to sum up what we have seen, where the GCC is heading, what has been the key focus? The key focus is the development of non-oil sector. So whether it is renewable energy, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's technology or tourism, we can see that there's around 250,000 of jobs planned in the renewable energy sector. There has been a major emphasis on the infrastructure, the development of ports, the development of railroad networks, the development of intercity like the metro network. Then they have the sovereign funds of the Middle East have increasingly started investing in robotics, AI, and technology. Last but not the least, tourism is at the forefront. We know for sure that Dubai is one of the most recognized tourism destinations of the world, and very soon the Saudi is catching up. Qatar has demonstrated its abilities with hosting the FIFA World Cup, and now Saudi is going to launch its very ambitious tourism projects in the Red Sea area. So the recent economic trends in the GCC economy, as you can see, there is key focus on the GDP growth. The non-oil sector is gradually having a larger share, as if we see. Then the growth of the non-oil sector is significant. We can see that the yellow shaded area in the graph. I'll move on to discuss the snapshot of the flat coated steel. Since I'm from the flat coated steel industry, I would like to just give you a snapshot of the installed capacities in this particular region in the UAE. So we have hot dip galvanizing facilities for flat coated steel in the tune of 1 million tons. For the color coated, we have around 500,000 tons of installed capacity in the UAE. Then we have the Saudi Arabian capacities. We have close to 500,000 tons with Saudi Basic Industries Hadid, which is state-owned, and Unicoil, which is having another 250,000 tons. So it's 500,000 tons of hot dip galvanizing facilities in Saudi Arabia. Now we see the proposed expansions in the region. The proposed expansions in the region, we have a major push in three major economies. In UAE, we have Emirates Steel. So Emirates Steel has announced a very ambitious project where it will have a new flat steel plant. It is still now only predominantly in the long segment, but it has signed up with Tata Consulting engineers for a first of its kind hot rolled mill in the region. And it is very soon, the project is taking shape, and very soon the official award will be announced. It is in tendering stage at the moment. With this, they will be adding flat for the first time in the UAE. Hot rolling capacities will be launched under Emirates Steel. Then we have Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, we have two major facilities launched. One of them, which is mentioned here, is the $4 billion integrated plant, which is announced by SR. This is going to be in the eastern region, and it is going to manufacture hot rolled coils as well as tin plate. There is another collaboration which is announced by Saudi Aramco and Bao Steel for the manufacture of hot rolled steel plates, particularly API grade plates for the oil and gas sector and other commercial grades as well. So that covers Saudi. And we have another large facility which has been announced by Jindal Shadid Group in Oman, which is $3 billion worth of investment. And it is being announced in Duqm area. One very interesting phenomena and key focus of all these facilities are they have key focus towards the green steel aspect of steel manufacturing. We'll discuss that later. So the crude steel production, when we saw some graphs from World Steel Association. So in the last year, in the year from January to November 2022, Middle East was the only region which demonstrated positive growth in the manufacturing of crude steel. We can see here it was 7.7% annual growth was recorded in the Middle East, and this is the only region with positive steel growth in the last year in 2022. And even the global steel making capacity increases over the next 5 years would be led by the Middle East and Asia. The macroeconomic outlook in the region is positive. As we can see, the Purchase Managers Index, which is a key measure for the month-over-month change of activity in the manufacturing sector, it's steadily going up in both in UAE and in KSA. In Qatar, we saw a dip just after the World Cup had finished, but again, it has risen up. Now, the oil production and the oil price. On here, we have seen that in 2022, we had a very positive, the oil prices were steadily above $80, and all the governments in the Middle East were enjoying a steady revenue from there, and there was an increased infrastructure spending because of that. The good thing is that before the mandate of oil production was they were generating revenue from oil production, and it was being spent on oil and gas projects predominantly. But the focus has shifted towards non-oil and gas and infrastructure projects and development projects which would have a sustainable future. So the revenue is being generated from oil and gas, but the sovereign governments of these regions have realized that hydrocarbons will be there, but over a period of time, their investing in sustainable energy, they're investing in infrastructure, and they're investing in tourism. So the macroeconomic outlook. So this is very interesting statistics which were published by the ENBD research team. So due to the recent fall in the oil prices, these were recently revised. These statistics are just from the end of May, and the growth forecast of UAE was revised from 3.9% to 3.4% in the year 2023. This is because of the declining oil prices over the last quarter. And the same for KSA, the forecast was 3.1%, but it has been reduced and revised to 2.1%. And for Qatar as well, and Kuwait, we can see if you see in 2022, it was 8% growth, and 2023, they're just forecasting a 0.2% growth. So 2023, we can say overall, because of the slight decline over the past quarter for the oil prices, is going to be steady for the Middle Eastern economies, but definitely not something very rosy can be expected because of the oil prices. So you can see here again, this was taken from the statistics, official government statistics of Saudi Arabia. They have announced that the real gross domestic product of Saudi Arabia grew by 3.9% in Q1 2023 as compared to Q1 2022. But the growth was due to an increase in the non-oil activities by 5.8%. So the good thing is they have realized all the economies are focusing on the non-oil sector, and the spending and the infrastructure is mostly focused on the non-oil sector. Still, despite the last quarter's decrease in the oil prices, the GCC growth is set to outperform many developed markets. This is certain statistics. As you can see, 2022 was a stellar year for the GCC economies, but even still, there have been various ambitious plans particularly by the UAE government and the Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia and UAE both have a Vision 2030, which is very ambitious indeed. And their key focus is to boost the trade, investment, and to promote this region as a global hub for tourism, investment, and trade. So we see that the GCC average of 2023 is forecasted to be at 2.3% growth. 2024 forecast is 3.6%. So there is again optimism after 2023. 2022 was definitely phenomenal. We had a 7.8% GDP growth in the region of combining all these 5 GCC countries. So the forecast, this is the short range outlook of published in April 2023 by the World Steel Association. So we can see here that the global growth is estimated at 2.3%, and the Middle East is close to the global growth, which is 2.2%. And we can see that some of the economies are having a very less forecasted growth. So the Middle East growth, year-on-year growth, is forecasted to be at par with the global growth in the steel demand. This is another interesting graph which can be seen from the World Steel Association, which sees that over the years from 1985, then 2000, 2018, and 2030, you can see here, of course, China has the demand in China. We can see in 2018 was at its peak, and 2030 the forecasted is a slight fall. But if you see the yellow and the green bands, so those are the ASEAN and the MENA region, so they have a steady growth, and good steady growth is forecasted for the MENA region, with the consumptions the global steel the demand forecast to be exceeding 1 billion tons in the year 2030. With this, I'll conclude my presentation with a very famous saying by the father of evolution, which is Sir Charles Darwin. It says, "It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one who is most responsive to change." And I do believe that this holds true for the Middle Eastern economy and the Middle Eastern nations. So we know from what humble beginnings Dubai has seen a remarkable transformation over the last 2 decades. So we know that the Western economies have already reached their developed stage, but the Middle Eastern economies and the Asian economies were not the strongest, but over the years, because of their resilience and because of their responsiveness to change, we have achieved a remarkable status in the global economy. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had some very good insights about the Middle Eastern steel markets. I'm open for questions now.
Thank you, Mr. Dana. That was indeed very insightful. You touched upon all key areas. The key projects are lined up in the Middle East. Importantly, the shift happening from it being an oil-based economy to frenetic development of infrastructure. Obviously, these projects will boost steel demand in the Middle East. Also, there is a growing focus on alternative energy projects, and infrastructure development is obviously for sustainable, for a sustainable future. And you also gave an outlook. Thank you. Over to Nishtha.
Thank you, ma'am. So my first question to you is, what are the challenges that are being faced by the Dubai-based steel mills?
So, Anisha, thank you very much for this question. One of the key challenges we face, I'm talking, since you've mentioned Dubai and I would say UAE in general, one of the key challenges which has been recently faced by all the UAE mills, whether it is flat steel or long steel, is the imposition of a 15% duty by the Saudi Arabia on UAE's manufactured steel products. So historically, the GCC was considered as one block, and it still is. So there is a custom-free trade agreement between the GCC countries, which is Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi, and UAE, to have a trade-free agreement between these countries. That has been there historically, and anything which is manufactured in UAE could be exported custom-free to Saudi or Oman or Qatar. But just in the year 2021, there was one key announcement by the Saudi Arabian government, which has imposed a 15% duty, particularly on steel products. So that has impacted us quite a bit, because Saudi Arabia, as you know, there's not only has been there a major infrastructure push in that region. There's a 40 million plus population. It's the largest area in the Middle East and the largest population. So the demand in that region is particularly high, and a lot of UAE mills were thriving on their exports to Saudi Arabia. But with this measure, a lot of those exports have significantly reduced. I think even though we are part of a GCC bloc, which is the countries, but this has been announced in particularly by KSA. So we can still export custom-free under the free trade agreement to Oman or to Bahrain, but we cannot to KSA, which is the biggest economy in the region. So it is a specific thing which has been announced. So that is one of the key challenges. All the UAE mills were keenly exporting to Saudi. It was just a day's journey by road to reach Saudi. It was land, well connected by land. But because of this 15% imposition, that is one of the key challenges. This is one of the challenges which we talk about. And of course, the second one is UAE being a very open economy. There is, of course, always a key imports being cheap imports coming in from the Far East, particularly China. So there is no any anti-dumping duty on Chinese products. So we face stiff competition from cheaper imports from Southeast Asia, particularly from China. These are the two main challenges I would like to highlight.
There's one question I would like to ask you. Scrap is increasingly gaining importance as a raw material for green steel making. Now, the UAE is a key scrap exporter too. So what is the country's plan on increasing usage of ferrous scrap in steel making, and importantly, preventing scrap exports?
So very good question indeed, Madam Madhumita. So this was a very key focus of the UAE government, and they knew that a lot of scrap was being exported from the UAE, and the export ban, as we speak, I mean, the export ban on scrap is already been imposed. So, which is a very good thing indeed for the melting electric arc furnace uh, route users in the region. So they are at the moment the export of ferrous scrap is actually banned. I think it was announced almost more than a year back. So this has become a welcoming change for the manufacturers here. So which encourages the melting of scrap within the country, and then supports a sustainable green economy. So the measure of exporting, banning the export of scraps has already been implemented in UAE.
Right. So what is your outlook on steel prices for the rest of 2023, both domestic and imports? And what factors will be driving this?
So the rest of 2023 is one in the, particularly if you consider the Middle East, it is a lot dependent on the oil prices. So of late in the last quarter, we've seen a softening of the oil prices. One of the main reasons of this, which has been attributed to the failure of rebound of China. So people were expecting that once the COVID restrictions would be eased in China, there would be a massive rebound, but it didn't actually happen. And China being one of the largest economies and a major consumer of oil, so the oil prices have actually faltered a bit. So because of that, the price outlook for the rest of next 2 quarters, I would say, is going to be more or less steady. I don't see a very rapid rise or a rapid decline, because it has already reached an equilibrium position. There was a spike in the first quarter of this year, and I think now it has reached a steady state of equilibrium, and I believe in the next 2 quarters it would sustain at around the same levels. I'm talking particularly in the Middle East because of the oil prices.
And what about imports, imported steel prices, offers?
So the imported steel prices, so UAE is largely the benchmark steel price in the UAE is actually dependent on the global market. So it's a small steel manufacturing nation. So I mean, you cannot. I'm from what I know in India, the mills announce their prices and everything is driven around that. But here, I think it's less of announcements. It's more of we watch what the global market is saying. So we would be watching in what India and China are saying, because if you consider the steel manufacturing capacity of UAE as a country, or even the Middle East as a whole, it's very less as compared to India and China. So we are always on relying on news from you guys to have our prices announced.
Nishta, would you like to ask the next question?
Yes. Dr. Dana, you spoke about the various infrastructure projects which are being lined up for the coming years. So what would be the estimated total investment that we are looking forward for GCC as a whole? And when do you see these projects getting completed?
So we have seen under the Vision 2030, we are at 2023 now. So the UAE and the Saudi, which are the two major economies in the region, both of them have a Vision 2030. So I'm sure they will definitely. So the next decade is definitely the decade to be in the Middle East. So they would definitely target all the completions before 2030. And the size of the investments is actually massive. It runs into billions and billions of dollars. And if you go through, some infographics and some messages, especially I'm talking of Saudi in particular here, particularly the NEOM project, and there's not just the NEOM project, it's not just the Line City. There's a lot of things happening around it. There's a NEOM industrial zone, Now we have the world's largest green hydrogen manufacturing facility which has been announced in NEOM. So a lot of activities surrounding that, the NEOM project and the Red Sea development. There's also a island resort development project. So all these, I think, would definitely come online before 2030, because both the countries which are leading these region is the UAE and the Saudi Arabia, and both of them have a very optimistic, very ambitious vision 2030. Over to you, Nishtha.
Nishta, would you like to ask?
Yeah, you can take up the audience questions.
No, I have one last question before we take up the audience queries. That is on, do you have any comments on the newer capacities that are coming up in this region? I think you had mentioned that they would have a green focus. So would you like to?
Yes. So the newer facilities which are all coming up in the region, whether it is the SR Steel project in KSA or the Jindal Shadid project in Oman or the Emirates Steel project in UAE. These are the key main three flat steel making facilities which have been announced. All of them are green focused. We have none of them, all of them are going to use the DRI and the scrap route. Not only that, there is a key focus, if I'm not wrong, particularly on the Jindal Shadid project, it has been announced that they will have their own green hydrogen manufacturing facility. They will be having their own solar plant and wind plant to support the manufacturing of green steel and the steel manufacturing process. So you can only imagine the extent to which they have gone to focus on this, because Middle East is, if you see the East and the West, it's in the middle. So the European markets and the American markets are the key target segments for all these manufacturers. And in Europe, and they don't talk about steel without the G of green steel. So there has to be the focus. And with these ultra modern mills coming up, unless they have those green practices in place and their carbon credits in place, they wouldn't be having those advantages of exporting to Europe. So definitely all of these facilities have that green focus, and they intend to continue in a sustainable manner and focus on the European and the American markets.
Thank you. Now we'll go over to the audience queries. A Steel Mint attendee has asked, you mentioned a lot of integrated flat steel capacities coming up in the GCC area. Now, how do you see the space for the re-rollers downstream players like Dana Steel or Aegis in future?
So a lot of hot rolling capacity is coming up in the region. So it's actually good for us. Being re-rollers, our feed is going to be hot roll coils. So it's actually good for us, because at the moment we are relying on imports from India or the Far East. So all that is going to move towards these local mills. So it's like making it in the UAE and buying your produce from UAE. So it is going to be more of a local supply chain for us. So it's actually going to be good for us. At the moment, we are exposed to the import risk and the transit time risk and the manufacturing time delays. So for example, if I am to book from India or China, there's a lead time and then there's a shipping time. So all that would be shortened. So these capacities of hot rolling which are coming up in the region will actually help to shorten and streamline our supply chain. So it's actually going to be good for us. And I think it will definitely make this region one of the key export driven manufacturing destinations, particularly for the US and Europe. If you remember, a few years back, this position was taken by Vietnam, because there was a lot of anti-dumping being imposed on Chinese mills. And then all of a sudden, there was a decade where these Vietnamese, and I clearly remember that is from the year 2010 to 2020, where massive flat steel manufacturing capacities, coated capacities came up in Vietnam, and they still continue to do so. and they're mainly targeted at the European and the US markets. So this phenomena, I could see a repetition of that happening in the UAE and the Middle East.
Very interesting. Another question, with China announcing stimulus measures like lowering of lending rates, will there be any improvement in global steel sentiments?
Yes, so as I said earlier, we were all waiting for China to open. And on 8th January this year, the Chinese government totally scrapped their COVID-19 policy, and we were expecting a massive, growth which is going to happen, and it was going to be driven by China, but actually that didn't happen. If you see in January, February, there was a spike in the steel prices just because it was surrounding that sentiment, but it actually didn't happen. We haven't been hearing very positive news from China in the last quarter, and because of this, they have actually lowered this interest rate to give it a further impetus. I think it was just announced a couple of days back, and let's see. I hope. We should hope that it will improve the sentiment, but I cannot comment on that for sure.
There's one question on Dana Steel. One person is asking, can we expect Dana Steel to focus on exports as well? And if yes, to which countries?
Yes, so definitely we are already exporting. We are actually already exporting. We're manufacturing in the UAE. As I told you, if you see the GCC itself, UAE is one of us. It's a small country. So we definitely, what we are manufacturing in the UAE is not intended just for the UAE. We're exporting to the GCC, we're exporting to Africa, we're exporting to Europe, we're exporting to Canada as well. So we are actually exporting. We're already exporting to these countries. So, and UAE is a destination where I told you, we could see a repetition of what happened in Vietnam happening in UAE as well.
Thank you. Anishta, would you like to ask any further question?
I think Sir has already given quite a bit of outlook on the near term and the upcoming projects that we expect GCC steel demand to increase in the near term. So I think that was all that we could accommodate in this session. If in case you have, the audience has any more queries and some queries have remained unanswered, do write us separately, and we'll definitely try our best to get them answered from our esteemed panelists. A very warm thank you, Dr. Dana, for your time. Thank you to Madhumita ma'am for joining in. And a big thank you again to Indian Steel Association for supporting this webinar series of us. I'm Nishtha Mukherjee, signing out of this webinar. Goodbye.